February 14th, 1943. Over the Solomon Islands, South Pacific, the air shimmered with tropical heat. Below, the jungles of Bougainville rolled like a sea of green waves, broken only by smoke columns rising from scattered airstrips. High above, Marine Major Gregory Pappy Boyington wiped condensation off his canopy and muttered to his wingman through the crackle of radio static. "Keep your eyes sharp, rookie. The Japs own the clouds today." The two Corsairs cut through the humid sky, engines growling with a thunder that could be felt in the bones. Their new machines, the F4U Corsairs, didn't look like anything else in the Pacific. Their wings bent downward at the root before rising again in a strange, inverted gull shape. Even Boyington, a battle-hardened pilot who had fought over China with the Flying Tigers, had laughed when he first saw one on the tarmac at Guadalcanal. "Looks like a pelican that flew into a wall," he joked. Japanese pilots laughed too. From the decks of the Zuiho and Junyo, they sneered at American propaganda photos of the odd new fighter. Its warped wings, long nose, and stubby tail seemed like design mistakes, clumsy and unbalanced. "A flying accident," one Japanese officer scoffed in a Tokyo bar, cigarette smoke curling through the air. "They build their planes like they build their hamburgers, heavy and ugly." But the joke would not last. The F4U Corsair was a beast born from brute engineering. Beneath its massive cowling sat the most powerful piston engine of its time, the 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. Its 12-foot, four-bladed propeller needed those bent wings just to clear the ground during takeoff. It could climb to 20,000 feet faster than any Allied fighter before it, and dive like a falling hammer. On paper, it was unstoppable. In the air, however, the first Corsair pilots found it terrifying. Its torque was violent. Yank the throttle too quickly, and the plane could flip itself upside down. Its landing gear bounced like a springboard, making carrier landings suicidal. The Navy, unimpressed, grounded it for carrier use. "Not suitable for deck operations," one admiral wrote. "The plane kills its own pilots before the enemy gets a chance." So the Corsair went to the Marines, the men who fought from dirt strips carved into jungles, where landing accidents were the least of their worries. Guadalcanal, 1943. The Marines were exhausted. For months they had fought off Japanese raids from the sky, Zero fighters diving in with surgical precision. The old F4F Wildcats couldn't keep up. The Zero could outturn them, outclimb them, and dance around them in the sky. But the Marines now had something new, something mean. As dawn broke over the island, a flight of 6 Corsairs lifted off the coral runway, their gull wings flashing in the sunlight. Boyington led the charge. "Let's see if this ugly bastard can bite," he radioed. Moments later, radar picked up 12 bogies inbound, Japanese A6M Zeros. The battle unfolded like a deadly ballet. Lieutenant Hiroshi Takahashi, a Zero ace with 9 kills, spotted the unfamiliar American planes and laughed. "Big engines, big wings," he said to his flight leader. "Slow pigs." He dove straight in, 20mm cannons ready. But as he pulled behind the lead Corsair, something unexpected happened. The blue fighter suddenly rolled over, climbed vertically, and vanished into the sun. The Zero followed, and was instantly outmatched. The Corsair's enormous power let it shoot upward faster than any Japanese pilot had ever seen. A second later, 6 .50 caliber Browning machine guns opened fire. Takahashi's cockpit filled with smoke, his engine exploded in a ball of flame that spiraled into the sea. Boyington's voice came over the radio, calm but electric. "These pigs can fly." By the time the fight ended, 8 Japanese planes had been shot down. None of the Corsairs were lost. That day, the Japanese mockery stopped. Reports filtered back to Rabaul and Tokyo. New American fighter, highly maneuverable at high speed. Difficult to engage, dangerous. The bent-wing monster had arrived. and it was hungry. To the Marines, it was salvation. To the Japanese, it was an omen. April 12th, 1943. Kahili Airfield, Bougainville. At dawn, Japanese ground crews stood beside their Zeros, squinting into the humid horizon. The jungle around the base steamed under the rising sun. A mechanic swatted mosquitoes from his face and muttered, "America no hikoki. They sound different." Moments later, the difference screamed across the sky. From behind a wall of cloud, a formation of blue-gray Corsairs descended in perfect synchronization, sunlight gleaming off their bent wings. The air filled with a sharp rising whine, not the high-pitched buzz of the Zero, but a ghostly howl that sliced through the air like the wail of the dead. Whistling death, that's what the Japanese would come to call it. Each Corsair carried 6 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing, capable of spewing 1,800 rounds per minute. In a single dive, the lead aircraft, flown by Captain Kenneth Walsh, shredded 2 Zeros as they attempted to take off. Another Corsair strafed the runway, bullets sparking against fuel drums. The sky turned to chaos. "Zeros climbing, 6 o'clock low," someone shouted over the radio. Walsh banked sharply left. A Zero flashed past, its pilot, Lieutenant Shigeru Okamura, trying to outturn the heavier American. But Walsh knew better than to dogfight. The Corsair wasn't built for graceful circles. It was built for speed, for diving, for hitting hard and running harder. He shoved the throttle forward, feeling the torque twist his whole body. The Corsair leapt forward like a beast uncaged. The Zero behind him couldn't keep up. Walsh pulled up into a steep climb, rolled over, and dove straight down, the howl of compressed air through the wing roots filling the sky again. The Japanese pilot looked up just in time to see the 6 guns ignite. A burst of tracers ripped through his right wing. The Zero disintegrated in a white flash. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, American pilots in the Pacific felt something they hadn't felt in years: dominance. Back on Guadalcanal, mechanics worked around the clock, tuning the Corsair's temperamental engines and smoothing their uneven wing rivets. Pilots joked that the Corsair hated them, that it tried to kill you every time you took off or landed. But once airborne, it was unstoppable. By the summer of 1943, squadrons like VMF 124 and VMF 214, Boyington's famed Black Sheep Squadron, were rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. Their Corsairs could dive faster than Zeros without tearing their wings off. They could absorb astonishing damage and still bring their pilots home. Marines began flying missions deep into enemy territory: Rabaul, Bougainville, Truk Lagoon, ambushing Japanese convoys and air patrols. Major Boyington, ever the showman, once described the Corsair like this: "She's not pretty, and she's not polite.
Lift her up.
But if you treat her rough, she'll kill anything that flies." Japanese intelligence reports became grim reading for officers in
adjust
Rabaul.
this connection.
Enemy aircraft designated F4U, one report read. Superior in speed, climb, and dive. Maneuvers at high speed extremely dangerous. Avoid head-on attacks. It was advice that came too late. August 25th, 1943. Off the coast of New Georgia, a dozen Corsairs escorted Navy bombers, striking a Japanese supply depot. 30 Zeros intercepted. Captain Walsh, now an ace, watched as tracer fire laced through the formation. "Break! Break!" he shouted. The sky became a blur of streaks and fire. Walsh rolled inverted, cut power, then dropped behind a pursuing Zero. He fired once. The Zero exploded midair. Another dove past him, overshooting. Walsh pulled the nose up, climbed through the smoke, then dove again. He downed 4 aircraft that day. For his actions, Kenneth Walsh would become the first Corsair pilot to receive the Medal of Honor. His citation would later read, "With gallant disregard for his own life, Captain Walsh repeatedly engaged superior enemy forces, downing 7 aircraft in 2 days." By late 1943, Japanese pilots had stopped laughing. They now feared the bent-winged demon that screamed from the clouds, a fighter that could take a beating, strike with fury, and vanish before they could react. A Zero pilot named Lieutenant Isamu Sasai wrote in his final letter home, "The new American plane, it howls when it dives, like the sound of the wind before a storm. We shoot and shoot, but it will not fall." In the Pacific, that howl meant death. November 11th, 1943. Rabaul, New Britain. Dawn crept over the horizon, staining the clouds blood red. Inside the ready room of Marine Fighter Squadron 214, the men of the Black Sheep lounged in sweat-soaked flight suits, helmets at their feet, waiting for orders. The walls rattled faintly with the growl of Corsairs warming up outside. Cigarette smoke hung thick as the humidity. Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, now 31 years old but already nicknamed Old Man, stood by the chalkboard, tracing lines over a hand-drawn map of Rabaul's harbor. "We're going after the bastards again," he said in his gravelly drawl. "Hit 'em fast, hit 'em hard. Don't hang around for tea." A few men chuckled nervously. Boyington looked up, grin fading. "These Zeros ain't gods anymore. They bleed just like we do." Outside, the airfield roared to life. 22 Corsairs, lined up wing to wing, their bent profiles gleaming in the sun. The metallic scream of their propellers echoed across the palms. Every engine carried the raw, defiant heartbeat of a war turning in America's favor. When the Black Sheep Squadron reached Rabaul, the harbor below was crawling with Japanese shipping. Freighters, destroyers, oil barges, all under the protective umbrella of Zero fighters. Boyington's voice crackled through the radio. "Let's get to work, boys." The Corsairs dropped from 20,000 feet like meteors. The howl of their wings filled the air. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from the ships below, black puffs of flak clawing upward. But the Marines dove through it without hesitation, their blue-gray aircraft streaking toward the target like vengeful spirits. Boyington's guns spat a torrent of .50 caliber fire into a freighter's bridge, shattering glass and spraying sparks. He pulled up hard, rolled, and came face to face with 2 Zeros diving toward him. "Here they come," he banked sharply, feeling the Corsairs shudder under the G-force. The Zeros tried to turn inside him, but they couldn't match his dive speed. Boyington cut power, kicked the rudder, and flipped upside down. The world blurred. His finger tightened on the trigger. 6 guns roared. 1 Zero vanished in an orange fireball. The other limped downward, trailing smoke. "Scratch 2, Boyington said coolly, voice steady. On the Japanese side, chaos reigned. Pilots accustomed to easy kills now found themselves hunted. The Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, was showing its age. It had no armor plate, no self-sealing fuel tanks. A single burst from the Corsairs' guns could tear it apart. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Shindo, one of Rabaul's senior air officers, wrote in his diary that night, "The new American aircraft, the bent wing one, climbs like a rocket and dives like a bullet. It ignores our guns. I warned the younger pilots, never follow it down. That is death." But pride often outweighed caution. 2 days later, Boyington led another strike over Bougainville. Japanese reinforcements swarmed from Rabaul, 30, 40 Zeros at once. The sky turned into a storm of smoke trails and spinning metal. Radio chatter filled with shouts, warnings, screams. Boyington's wingman, Lieutenant Irish O'Neill, yelled, "They're all over me." Boyington rolled over, dove behind a chasing Zero, and opened fire. The enemy aircraft exploded in midair, pieces whirling past his canopy. But the price was heavy. O'Neill's Corsair disappeared into the sea seconds later. When the squadron landed that evening, only 15 of the original 22 planes returned. Mechanics counted 200 bullet holes across Boyington's fuselage. He climbed out, tossed his helmet aside, and muttered, "Hell of a day." From that month onward, The balance of the Pacific skies shifted. The U.S. Marines, once the hunted, were now the hunters. Japanese pilots dreaded the sight of those blue wings and the mournful shriek that announced their approach. By early 1944, the Corsair had become the cornerstone of Allied air supremacy. Its kill ratio over Japanese aircraft soared past 11-1, an unprecedented record. On the decks of carriers, Navy engineers finally tamed its violent landings, fitting longer landing gear and new tailhooks. The Corsair that had once been too dangerous for carriers was now launching from them daily. The Pacific was changing, not through speeches or strategy papers, but through the thunder of engines, the whistle of air over bent wings, and the stubborn will of men who refused to die. And in that crucible of fire, the legend of the F4U Corsair, the so-called bent-winged devil, was forged in full. January 3rd, 1944. Kahili Bay, Bougainville. The morning was eerily calm. A blanket of silver mist clung to the jungle canopy, muffling every sound except the occasional whine of an idling Corsair. On the strip, mechanics wiped oil-stained hands against their trousers, tightening the last bolts on gun bays and fuel tanks. The smell of cordite hung in the air, the smell of inevitability. Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington climbed into his cockpit, strapped himself in, and adjusted his oxygen mask. His Corsair, marked with the number 86, sat crouched like a beast ready to pounce. He had flown more missions than most of his men could count. Today would be his last, though he didn't know it yet. "Black Sheep Squadron, saddle up," came the command. The bent-wing monsters thundered down the runway, lifting into the overcast sky. Beneath them, the Pacific shimmered like molten steel. Their destination, Rabaul, again. The Japanese fortress had become a graveyard for pilots from both sides. Anti-aircraft guns, zero patrols, and dense jungle terrain made it one of the most dangerous targets in the war. Boyington led his formation of Corsairs at 20,000 feet. "Keep tight, watch your tails. If it moves and it ain't blue, kill it." They spotted the first Japanese fighters near Cape St. George. A dozen Zeros climbing fast, sunlight catching their white Hinamaru markings. The radio erupted. "Tally-ho! Bandits, 2 o'clock high!" The sky shattered into chaos. Corsairs dove into the fight, guns blazing, engines howling with that infamous shriek that terrified anyone who heard it. Japanese pilots, veterans who once dominated the air, now found themselves overwhelmed. Lieutenant Kazuo Iwamoto, one of the Imperial Navy's top aces, later wrote, "Their blue planes scream from the clouds. They strike, then vanish into the sun. The men call them death whistles, because by the time you hear them, it's too late." Boyington's Corsair locked onto a Zero below. He fired, short, controlled bursts. The tracers found their mark, and the Japanese fighter disintegrated mid-air. "Splash one!" he shouted. Moments later, another Zero appeared from behind. Bullets shredded Boyington's right wing. He jerked the stick, rolled inverted, and dove for the deck. The ocean's surface whipped toward him, 400 miles per hour, then 500. The Corsair vibrated violently, the engine screaming in protest. But that was where the Corsair excelled. In a dive, no Zero could follow. Boyington pulled up at the last second, feeling the G-forces crush his chest. The pursuing Zero tried to mimic the move and tore itself apart. Back at base, the squadron counted 11 confirmed kills that morning.
All right, that's
But
5.
Boyington never returned.
You aiming for them or just
His
flying
plane
through the
vanished
flak?
somewhere over
Both, I
Rabaul's
guess.
northern coast. For days,
Get her patched
Marines
up by
combed the
morning.
waters. No wreckage, no parachute, no signal. He was presumed dead. In Tokyo, Japanese pilots celebrated, claiming to have downed the leader of the Blue Devils. In reality, Boyington had survived, captured by a Japanese submarine after ditching at sea. He spent the rest of the war as a prisoner, his identity unknown to his captors. But the machine he helped master, the F4U Corsair, carried on his legacy. Throughout 1944, the Corsair dominated the skies over the Marshall Islands, the Marianas, and the Philippines. Navy squadrons, now trained in carrier operations, launched waves of Corsairs from decks of Essex-class carriers. The plane that once couldn't land on a boat now ruled every deck in the Pacific. Japanese pilots dreaded its profile. Its wings, like scythes. Its nose, long and ominous. Its sound, that haunting, descending scream that filled every pilot's last seconds. By mid-1944, the Corsair's kill ratio climbed above 11-1, an almost mythic number. In some battles, entire Japanese squadrons were wiped out before landing a single shot. The once feared Zero had become prey. American pilots painted their Corsairs with shark mouths, lightning bolts, and pin-up girls. They flew them with swagger and vengeance, knowing they were flying the deadliest piston fighter of the Pacific. In the words of Marine ace Robert M. Hansen, before his own death in early 1944, "You can mock her all you want. She's ugly, loud, and angry. But when that engine screams, you better pray she's not behind you." The bent-wing bird had fulfilled its destiny. Once dismissed, now divine. Once ridiculed, now revered. By war's end, over 12,000 Corsairs had been built. They would serve not just through World War II, but into Korea, their engines still howling across the skies of history. The Japanese called it Whistling Death. The Marines called it the Sweetheart of the Pacific. History remembers it as the fighter that turned mockery into fear.